Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our event introducing the 2020 Circular City Cohort. We appreciate you all joining us this afternoon. My name is Kate Shubik, and I'm part of the Newlab team. Many of you are probably familiar with our work at Newlab, but for those of you who aren't, at the heart of what we do is applying transformative technology to things that matter. Newlab is home to a growing community of entrepreneurs, inventors, and engineers. We support over 150 companies made up of 800 individuals working across a variety of tech domains. We also work with government agencies, corporations, and researchers, and multidisciplinary collaboration and the importance of bringing an entrepreneurial, civic, and ethical lens to our commitment of advancing technology is core to our work. Today, we're excited to introduce you to the 4 startups that are participating in this year's Circular City Studio. Circular City launched in 2018 with support from the New York City Economic Development Corporation and is designed to empower urban tech startups to help make New York more equitable, livable, and resilient. In cooperation with city agencies, industry leaders, community organizations, and researchers, the Circular City Studio aims to accelerate the product development, adoption, and investment in technologies proven to be effective in addressing complex and urgent challenges facing New York City. The 2020 program officially kicked off in January with an open call seeking companies building frontier tech and developing novel products that tackle 2 focal points for New York City's sustainability agenda: transitioning to a circular economy and improving energy efficiency in buildings. We're excited to use this opportunity to introduce the 4 companies that were selected to participate. They will each share a brief overview of their company and mission and a sneak peek into the pilots they will be deploying across New York City this summer. Today, we will hear from Danielle Joseph, board member and investor from Algramo, Savita Herzl, co-founder and CEO of Aclima, David Solomon, chief revenue officer of Sapient Industries, and Doug Shumway, founder and CEO of RanMarine USA. Before we dive into the presentations, just a few housekeeping notes. After each presentation, our speakers will field questions from the audience. To ask a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and just type in your question. As those come in, I will be checking those and getting them in front of our panelists once their presentations conclude. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Danielle Joseph from Algramo to kick us off with her presentation.
Thanks so much, Kate, and to everyone at the Newlab team. We're super excited to be a part of this cohort and launching in New York City. So as a kind of quick background, Algramo is a company that's actually based in Santiago, Chile. We are investors in that company as closely partners, and we're leading the charge to launch this in New York City with Newlab in Brooklyn specifically. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here, but the general problem that we've identified is that there's a tremendous amount of plastic pollution that is going into our environment and not getting collected in our recycling systems. In addition, when you look at low-income or middle-income communities that are purchasing everyday products like your cleaning fluids, your dog food, whatever it is that you might buy in your local bodega, you're typically paying about a 40% premium against what you might otherwise buy in bulk. And a really significant contributor to that premium cost, in addition to the real estate and where you're buying it, is actually the cost of the packaging. And so the insight that Algramo had was that you can actually reduce the amount of plastic pollution that's getting into our environment and reduce the cost to consumers for purchasing these everyday and essential products by eliminating the packaging. And so that's what we've created. And next slide, please. So what we've created is a kiosk kind of dispensing system that allows users to reuse packaging for these very popular kind of everyday products and do it in a way that brings the cost per ounce down for the consumer and obviously creates the right kind of environmental incentive both for the city and for individuals. What you see here pictured is actually the mobile unit. This is what Algramo has launched with in Santiago, Chile. We'll be bringing one of these to Brooklyn. The idea is this is actually an electric powered scooter with the Algramo system on the back. Santiago is a much less crowded place than New York City, so we're actually going to have the same system, but on a standalone basis, because it's hard to navigate city streets. But we'll go into that in a second. So if you go to the next slide, please. Here's the standalone unit. You can see it on the right-hand side. We're anticipating putting these in a number of locations, which we'll get to. But as a quick reminder, this is a smart dispensing system for household products, and we're working with major brands that customers already know and love. We're offering the lowest price per ounce and allowing customers to only buy what they need. So with your reusable packaging, you put this into the dispensing slot on the Algramo machine and use the touchscreen, or what we're also working on is a contactless mechanism, so you don't actually have to touch anything but your own package and the app on your phone. You tell the machine how much product you want. Oh, sorry. Keep on that last slide. Thanks. You tell the machine how much product you want, and it will dispense automatically for you. We're also talking about putting these machines in the most convenient locations to customers. So whether that's the laundromat across the street from you, the place where you go every day, whether your office location, but also in your building. So really targeting residential applications, potentially in the lobby or in the laundry room of your building, and then obviously creating that environmental incentive. Next slide, please. So here are the products that we're talking about launching with. We have a bleach, an all-purpose cleaning product for any kind of surfaces, countertops, whatnot. A generic or a branded hand soap, and then also a hand sanitizer. We were actually through Newlab and some of our relationships connected to one of the companies that's in the Brooklyn Navy Yard that is making a hand sanitizer locally. So we're going to be working with them. You don't see the brands on here because we are officially finalizing those agreements, but hopefully next week we'll be able to share with you who all of those brand partners are that we're really excited to be working with. Obviously, during this time of coronavirus, we're also really excited to be offering these products that are essential for keeping everyone clean and healthy. And this is a bit of how it works. So what we have is actually an app function where you can see all the products that you've bought. You can see how those products link to actually the packaging. There's a RFID chip in the packaging, so every time you put it into the machine, you don't have to enter any new information. It's tied directly to your personal account. And then as kind of demonstrated, you can click how, you can click exactly how much you want to refill. If you only have 50 cents or $1 in your pocket that day, that's all you need to refill. If you want, you can preload your account. So you can imagine actually, like for colleges and universities, maybe a parent will load their child's account with $10, $15 a month, and then that child can or that college student can choose what products they want at any time. So really interesting applications that tie the hardware that we've developed to a back-end software as well. Next slide, please. And as mentioned before, we're super excited to grow with Newlab. So through the Newlab partnership, we're working with the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We'll be in building 77 next to the PPE vending machine and in that space. So looking forward to that opening up and having more foot traffic coming through there. Through the Flatbush Business Improvement District, we've actually been connected with this amazing laundromat in the area that we're going to be installing one of the standalone locations in. And then we're also working to establish partnerships with a co-op in Flatbush that would be one of our first residential applications, and using the mobile unit for maybe a downtown Brooklyn application, like in a park or some kind of event when the city starts to reopen in that sense. We're always looking for new opportunities to bring this to market. So if you have any, if anyone on the line is excited about bringing this into their community, please let us know. Next slide, please. And this is it. So just by way of background, again, the founder is Chilean and wonderful. There's a whole team down there. We're hiring on a wonderful person to bring this to life in New York. And we have a great set of partners, including Newlab. So excited to be here and open to any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Danielle. That was awesome. So I'm going to kind of throw a bit of a two-part question at you. So obviously, as you mentioned, this is kind of your first expansion into the New York and US market. So could you share with us one insight based on your operation in Santiago, Chile, that you'll be implementing as you expand to new markets, specifically New York? And then as you prepare for the entry to the US market, is there anything unique about your strategy or anything that's going to be uniquely different than what you're currently doing in Chile?
Yeah, those are two really good questions. So learnings from the operation in Chile. One is that, I mean, it's been kind of a crazy ride. As everyone knows, we've been dealing with coronavirus through the launch of this. The Algramo actually initially launched in Chile with their own branded product, and then brought in these other, like, you know, they're partnered with Unilever right now, and also Nestle down in Chile. And so one of the learnings that they've discovered is that their own kind of branded product has been doing really well. It's kind of well loved by the community, but there's a whole subset of the population that's actually really excited about using the branded products that they know and love, which is why we started with that in the US market. But I think, you know, one of the things that we're going to pay attention to through the course of this pilot is how important that is for consumers here, right? How through our initial customer interviews that we've done, that does seem to be a key factor, right? If it's the products that they know, they're more likely to buy through this new system. But it's definitely something that we're going to test to see if, you know, if it's something that that we maybe expand into in a different way. And then some things that are unique to the US market. I mentioned the difference between the mobile unit and the standalone unit. So we're excited to trial the standalone units here. I think that something else that might be different is that there's a vision of the future where we have actually a full Algramo store, like its own retail location exclusively these Algramo machines. So it's an entirely, almost like a Amazon Go, but with the Algramo system. And so that's something that might happen here. But generally, I think the systems are going to be the same. Consumer preferences are going to be a little different. So how people buy is something that we're going to learn about as we move forward with this.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Danielle. Great. Now I would like to pass it over to Savita Herzl from Aclima to hear their presentation. Savita?
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us today. And again, you know, incredibly excited to be working with Newlab. So to introduce you to Aclima, I'll start with an overview of what we do and who we are. Next slide, please. So we are a public benefit corporation that's built for good and really committed to catalyzing change towards a more resilient and flourishing world that is climate healthy and protects the health of people and the planet. We are the world leader in hyperlocal air quality and greenhouse gas measurement and analysis, and we deliver that data through a software platform to governments and companies with block-by-block resolution and at metropolitan scale. And the reason we started the company was that there was a realization that we're actually missing the data to understand the myriad of challenges that are presented by the challenge of air pollution. Air pollution creates risk across multiple classes. So the same emissions that are changing the climate are also causing tremendous health impacts, impacting every single organ in the human body at every phase of life, exposing companies to tremendous financial liability, and really exposing the disproportionate impacts of that pollution on communities of color in particular, as we are contending with the climate crisis. And in the last several months, with the crisis of COVID-19, there has actually been new science that has been pointing to a direct link between COVID-19 and exposure to air pollution, with every single unit increase of PM2.5 contributing to an 8% increase in death rate. Next slide, please. And so when we look at the current state of measurement to really understand air quality at the local scale, we are missing that hyperlocal view. Today, air quality is measured with very expensive equipment that is difficult to deploy, and it gives us very low resolution data. But Aclima has invented a new way to measure air pollution with block by block resolution. We refer to this kind of measurement as hyperlocal measurement that helps us understand pollution at this block by block scale and the neighborhood scale to understand what communities and entire populations are exposed to, down to your address. And the way that we do this is by installing our sensors on fleets of vehicles. This is actually an image of a Google Street View car. We partnered with Google years ago to validate and introduce this methodology. And as those vehicles are driving through city streets, we are gathering this critical information to understand pollution block by block, stitching it together to then give us a picture of that neighborhood scale view of pollution. And the way we do this is through a completely integrated technology stack, from sensor to next slide, please. From sensor to back end, collecting billions of data points per day, and ultimately delivering that to our customers and users in an easy-to-use software platform that enables them to also integrate other data sets like health data, land use data, demographic data, to really be able to make the critical connections between air quality and multiple other issues. Next slide, please. The platform really gives us a very scalable approach that delivers big impact with that hyperlocal view, with the capacity to benchmark performance and understand how we're doing, not just block to block, but neighborhood by neighborhood, community to community, and even sort of city to city and state to state. Next slide, please. In New York, we will be measuring a broad set of parameters, including all the regulated air pollutants except for lead, as well as greenhouse gases and temperature, to understand things like heat island effect. Next slide. We are currently deployed very broadly in California, and we will be taking those experiences and lessons learned to really understand how to best localize them for the unique needs of New York communities and our potential users in the city of New York. In New York City, we'll be launching in Brooklyn starting this summer, working in partnership with the Brooklyn partnership, mapping across downtown Brooklyn and East Flatbush, and really using this as our phase 1 area deployment as we work to expand across the city of New York. And our goals are focused and targeted in a few areas. Next slide. Initially, we want to make sure that our data is really being optimized to support the long-term COVID-19 response, and we'll be engaging multiple different agencies across the city to ensure that our data is directly supporting that analysis about the long-term response and how to really address the deep inequities that COVID-19 is showing with the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 on communities of color. And our other goals are really related to climate change. New York has really implemented extremely ambitious climate goals, and this data can be incredibly empowering to really optimize targeted resources and interventions to reduce emissions and inform policy and policy initiatives to drive emissions reductions. And our next steps are to engage with local environmental justice advocacy groups. We want to bring our lessons learned and our practice of engaging directly with communities to inform technology deployment and development. And we will be, in addition to making Aclima Pro available to policymakers, we will be making the data broadly available through our public app to the public so that anybody can look up air pollution by address in Brooklyn. And we'll also be engaging members of the research community, city and state agencies, as well as utilities as we would prepare for deployment this summer, and then also engage more broadly with applicability and usage of our data across multiple applications. So with that, thank you so much. Incredibly excited to be launching today, and thank you to the Newlab team and the New York EDC.
Thank you so much, Savita. That was excellent. And it's great that you really teed up some of the kind of findings and goals that you would love to see the local New York community use and learn from this pilot. So curious to understand, obviously Aclima is focused on really empowering and supporting environmental justice groups, local nonprofits, advocacy groups. Can you share an example of how the data that's been collected in San Francisco has been utilized by some of these different groups, just to give us a little bit of an idea of what this looks like in practice?
Sure. So in California, actually through AB 617, which is legislation in California that requires monitoring and emissions reductions in frontline communities across the state, we've partnered with a number of communities, and I'll speak to in particular the partnership with West Oakland, where the hyper-local data that we've generated has been used in combination with a lot of other data sets to support the creation of a community emissions reductions plan that has nearly 100 different interventions that are really driven by the findings of this kind of measurement. And those interventions include everything from electrification at the port and sort of targeted initiatives to support electrification, to different changes in land use that are more long-term, to investment in vegetation and targeted investment in corridors that would actually sort of increase green space. And so there's a broad variety of actions that can be taken to reduce emissions in the short term and the long term, and to protect public health. That this data really helps to sort of target those interventions so that it's really data driven and then ultimately measurable to understand if those interventions are having the impact that communities want.
Absolutely, thank you. It's great to hear about the breadth of those interventions, as you noted as well. Great, well, thank you so much. We are now going to move on to our next presenter, which is David Solomon from Sapient Industries. Give it to you, David.
Hi, again, thanks for having us here. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Sapient. We're going to be talking about building intelligence and analytics. And just as a quick background, we're focusing our attention on large enterprise accounts, including clients who are in the Fortune 2000 and cover an unlimited number of industries from education, financial services, telecom, government, healthcare. We even participate in industrial and manufacturing and even laboratory environments. We believe we're the only player in the market today providing a commercial, scalable, plug load management solution. Can you stay on the front page? Sorry. That is economically feasible with our ROI payback, we believe anywhere from less than 1 year to we typically never exceed 3 years in terms of payback. Before I begin, let me define what plug load is for anyone that doesn't know. In commercial buildings, there are 3 primary areas that consume electrical energy. 1 is HVAC, the heating and cooling system. 2 is lighting, and 3 is plug load. Plug load is the electrical power used by all plugged in devices and equipment throughout the building that are plugged into sockets. So it's sometimes, it has been pretty ignored to date. We like to say this is the final frontier for building analytics. Next page, please. So what is today's commercial building problems? People are usually surprised to learn an alarming industry trend related to commercial buildings. On average, for any commercial building, HVAC and lighting together drive about 2/3 of a total energy consumed, and plug load represents 1/3. And all of the new innovation in building management systems to date has only focused on HVAC and lighting. So those two are becoming more and more efficient and are expected to be reduced from its current 2/3 to less than 50% in a few years. That leaves plug load, which is unmanaged. So it will take up the void and expected to increase from the current 1/3 to over 50% in the next few years. And over half of that is expected to be wasted energy due to something that's called the vampire draw or phantom draw. This is when equipment, anything that's plugged into the sockets, is left on but unused and energy still being drawn and wasted. The other issue that I want to state is companies more and more want to have, quote, smart buildings with central visibility that will provide truly full building information to make fully informed decisions. But to do so, you need at most the most granular level of data, and that's plug load data. And here you can see HVAC and lighting can certainly be sub-metered to floor levels, sometimes somewhere between floor levels and room data level, but nothing goes further than that. If you wanted to sub-meter today with HVAC and lighting, you need to put in a new panel electricians, very expensive, not scalable. Next page. So what's our solution? We have developed what we believe is the first full turnkey in the cloud SaaS application that runs a deployment of smart outlets and power strips that collect, analyze, and control, and those are three different things, and control means turn on and off live power consumption data on each and every plug-in device in a building. So let's talk about the web application first. The web application uses machine learning and AI with patented algorithms that provides predictive analytics to help anticipate the needs and the actions of the people and equipment. So you can, one, automatically identify each plugged-in device like laptops, monitors, cell phones, or even refrigerators. Two, you can develop rules in the application to turn on and off equipment based on what people are going to use. And three, as a result, we can determine and predict how much energy they're consuming and how much energy can be saved by the profile of the piece of equipment. In terms of hardware, they are smart. That's why they're called smart power strips and smart plugs, because each one of these sockets can communicate via Wi-Fi to the application in the cloud with all the power data for each socket, including the equipment voltage, current, and reactive power profile. It's truly the fingerprint of each piece of equipment. And each socket has a relay switch, so they are independently meterable. They're also controllable, so we can turn them on and off individually. We have different types of hardware types. The first you see on the left, external smart plugs and strips for existing buildings. Two, in-wall receptacles for new construction. And three, something that's fairly cool, it's called the passive meter that you can strap on the cable of equipment. And it's for equipment that you don't want to turn off, but you do want to monitor it. It could be because they run 24/7, or it's expensive in the lab, and you want to have better preventive maintenance efforts because we have an anomaly detection and notification system, which I'll talk about in a second. Can you go to the next one? So there's three value propositions that we address. The first one's reduce energy consumption. Two, enhance sustainability efforts by reducing carbon footprint. And three, identify equipment redundancies. We also can help develop a true proactive preventive maintenance program. We can optimize building space configurations, and we can improve safety. People never realize what you could do with what's called plug load data. It's a lot of things. For reduction of energy consumption on the left here, we have reduced total building energy consumption on average by 10 to 15% by using reduced, we like to call it the first item, after hours reduced energy consumption, and we also can do demand peak shaving, and if people want to know more about it, I can provide after. And then we also have asset management. We provide automated anomaly detection that notifies facilities or maintenance via email or text for every device in a building based on voltage or current anomalies. So if there's an issue, you can proactively know it before there's failures. We can also identify redundant equipment and wasted space. Together, these drive reduced costs and labor costs. And again, lastly, on the reduced carbon footprint, we'll take the kilowatt hours that are saved from the energy, and it becomes a new innovative line item in organizations' goals and objectives to meet their carbon neutrality efforts. Next page. A go-to-market strategy. We do support our clients with a designated customer success manager. That's why we call ourselves a managed SaaS solution and data analytics to ensure the system is launched and up and running within days, as it requires no technology integration. I hate to say this, but it's truly plug and play and is low touch from our client perspective. Next page. In terms of its application to COVID-19, we've experienced some interesting approaches. One is we can, on the left side, we can provide another layer to support safety protocols by leveraging our features to enhance social distancing. We can actually people want to create safe distancing by having alternate workstations being used. We can actually deactivate specific workstations by cutting power to them, which works effectively. And on the right-hand side here is just a recent survey that was done in New York, in which we can actually help save some significant money. This stat is really interesting. It showed that during COVID, occupancy rates were down 96% during the middle of COVID, but energy consumption was still at 71% of full operating capacity. If you think about it, that's incredible. It really, the operating expenses should be lower. A good amount of that was due to plug load and equipment and devices that were left on but unused. Next page. So for this project and what we'll be doing with Newlab, Sapient will install its plug load management solution at Newlab headquarters in Brooklyn Navy Yards. It will cover across 84,000 square feet of workspace, conference rooms, and machine shop, and we'll be doing that over the summer. Some of the metrics we'll be covering is measuring reduced energy consumption, reduced carbon footprint, and a number of the asset utilization tools that I discussed. And that is it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate that. So curious, one thing I wanted to ask was when Sapient was getting started, how did the team kind of come across and discover plug load as this kind of overlooked or underappreciated aspect of energy efficiency in buildings?
Well, believe it or not, the founders were roommates at Penn, and one was a nanotechnologist physicist, and one was a Wharton, very smart guy from Wharton. As they did it, they saw the utility bills were really expensive, and they said there has to be something to it. They initially, a few years back, kicked out more in the residential side and consumer side, and they quickly realized how impactful it could be for commercial, because when you bring this up to folks, people are amazed, especially in commercial buildings, that there is nothing managing plug load. They're basically, on average, 1/3, as I said, is plug load today. It's completely being ignored to date. So that's how they came about it. They did a little bit of research, but it all started because your utility bills were higher than they thought it should be.
Okay, great. We have one other question that I'll sneak in. Is the hardware UL and CSA approved?
Yes, it is.
Question. Awesome. Short and sweet. Great. Thank you so much, David. We're now going to move on to our final presentation. Last but not least, Doug Shumway from RanMarine USA. Doug, if you could join us now.
Sure. Thanks, Kate. Doug Shumway from RanMarine USA. And we're attacking two primary problems in this pilot program. First is waste in our waterways. And regardless of whether it's a lake, river, marina, port, canal, wherever society meets water, there's pollution. And we're really trying to attack this pollution at the source. And pollution could be just general marine debris, plastic, biomass, even oil and gas spills that sit on top of the water. So really trying to attack this at the source. And there's a lot of noble solutions out there that are trying to take it out of the ocean. And the problem is with that, it's no one's responsible for the ocean. No governments are responsible for the ocean. Also, it's a much more complex type of recovery because of the conditions and the environment that it's in. And the last thing too is it's at the last stage. The plastic, the waste is already breaking down, already sunk to the bottom of the ocean, and therefore it really minimizes the amount of waste that can be collected. So we're trying to turn off that faucet, again, at the source where we have responsibility, where we can capture it before it gets to that point. What you're looking at right now is the Wayshark. And this is designed to remove that trash, that waste, that debris. we remove our trash from our streets, we remove our trash from our parks. Why don't we remove it from the water? Okay. Now, with the Wayshark, it's designed as it's almost like a catamaran design. You see the waste basket in the middle. And it's a drone that operates at the surface of the water and actually goes around and actually collects this particular trash for removal. And also, it's very portable and nimble because it operates in very tight areas, whether it's a port or marina or a city park or wherever it may be. It has to be portable so it can be deployed on multiple areas, multiple types of water, whether freshwater or saltwater. And so it's designed about 5 feet by 4 feet to give you an idea of the size of it. Now, it's equipped with some advanced technology. It has autonomous technology built in, so it can go on predefined paths, or you can geofence and it'll operate within a certain specific area. It actually has 4G on board to be able to pass data up to AWS real time, so you can see operational data as well as water quality data. And that's the second problem we're tackling, is we need to understand what's in our waterways, right? Because our water affects our quality of life, the health of our community, and even all the environmental impact it can have as well. And this allows us, you can go back please, this allows us to be a little more proactive in how we capture the data, right? Because it can capture over a wide variety of area. It allows us to identify issues before they happen, right? And be able to communicate with other people on that same water body, whether it's a river, other communities. And also allows us to capture data to predict future situations. For example, toxic blooms are happening everywhere. And a lot of times it impacts with warmer weather, with runoff. We can actually detect that and actually identify potential issues to mitigate it. Now, how we're capturing that data is there actually can be over 15 high quality, high grade sensors on the actual drone. We can capture things like blue-green algae, turbidity, pH, temperature, crude oil, refined oil. So a lot of different options for us to be able to capture that data. By collecting, analyzing, and sharing the data, we're going to be creating a mission control for our waterways. Talk about some of the use cases. Now, I did talk about the first use case being waste removal. And because of the size, it actually can still be nimble and portable, but still operate and be very efficient in actual waste removal. It's capable of removing over 1,000 pounds of marine debris per day. The second use case is water quality. Obviously, we need to understand what's in our water. We work with a lot of government agencies as well as commercial agencies that need to be able to test and understand what's going on, what's happening, to be able to take action when necessary. Biomass removal could be hyacinth or duckweed. The biomass can actually cover the entire surface of the water and actually change the actual waterway itself, the environment of the water, whether it's the oxygen or a number of different things. So we want to remove that biomass before it changes the ecology of the water and also the wildlife in that water. Oil mitigation is very big. We actually are developing a skimmer that will actually go around, the drone will go around, skim oil off the surface of water or gasoline, refined oils, and be able to capture those, including using geofencing to be able to quarantine off certain areas that you need to cover and clean. And then toxic algae, this is where we'll be looking at using third-party data to understand where potential outbreaks may happen and really look at some of that weather data, some of the historical data to understand that. The drone itself actually is driven by battery, so there's no emissions. And I saw that question just pop up. There's no emissions, 100% battery driven, and then in autonomous mode, it can operate up to 10 hours per day on a charge. So you can change it. Slide. All right, Governor's Island. For those of you who may not be in New York, Governor's Island really sits right between Manhattan and Brooklyn. You can kind of see that in that picture right there. But it is obviously an island. And Governor's Island is really a park, public space with a focus on sustainability, resiliency. Now, there are some local organizations on there that are very socially focused. There's a harbor school for the maritime industry. And really, it's a cultural destination for New York itself in the city. Now, the goals of the pilot, really three basic goals. One, we want to clean the waterways, because what you're looking at right there is the East River, and you can see how trash can flow down that river and get caught on the northern end of the island. So we want to clean that and also clean some of the areas around the docks and the seawall of that. Now, as we're actually cleaning it, we want to capture that water quality data. We understand what's in that water, the depth of water, and be able to build a library of data, but also share that data with other departments in New York City, so they can actually use some of their data to be able to map it or whatever we come up with. The third thing is educate, because there's so many people going to the island and the high schools there. They really want to have an educational program about this, of different technology that be used to protect our waters, that allow us to contribute to the circular economy, and also allow opportunities to reuse what we're taking out of the water as well. All right, pilot structure, very basic. We're going to do a 6-week pilot. We're going to implement it, work with the team there, do site assessments, and then facilitate it. We're going to be working with the various entities there, with the harbor school and some of the environmental groups, and obviously the operational staff, to actually operate the drone and see what's being collected, what can be reused, and understand some of that, and then work with the various departments on the data side as far as analyzing the data, providing feedback, and to understand the overall impact. From an impact perspective, there's really two types we're focusing. One is operational impact, and other is policy impact. From operational impact, what are we taking out of the water? What type of water quality data are we seeing? What are the trends that water quality data? Also, the East River is a very harsh environment. How are we operating that harsh environment? Because it's a tidal river that the current flows very fast. How does that impact our collection and operation? And then from a policy standpoint, what is our impact on the Vision 2020, specifically the waterfront plan? Also, the water quality measurements, and how can we interact with the departments to share and collaborate on data. So that's really the structure of the pilot and a little bit about us.
Great, thank you so much, Doug. So one question that we have coming in here is, can you talk about how the Wayshark deals with boat traffic, or perhaps any other, potential conflicts within the water? And then, is it something that operates at night at any point? And if so, how is it equipped to basically identify itself in the water? Is there a light blinking or something like that?
Yeah, so the first answer to the question, we do have the ability of have an option for collision avoidance package. What that means is for more high volume traffic areas, and it's equipped with software tied to our within the system, but also LiDAR. So built-in LiDAR that you see on traditional boats. And what it will do is it'll detect traffic or potential traffic, and then either hold position or actually move to get out of the way as that traffic passes by. So some of the logic built in, so it uses both. And the second question, repeat that to me, Kate, again, sorry.
Oh, I was just asking if the Wayshark ever operates at night or in the dark, and if there's some sort of mechanism to have it identified as it's in the water.
So there's two phases to that too. Yes, it can be equipped with night light system. It really depends on where it's operating, whether it's a controlled environment versus a little more environment with traffic like we'd be seeing around Governor's Island. We are doing an integration with AIS. That's what basically is a system that's used in large ships where you can actually see traffic on radar. And so that would be more appropriate to that. So it really depends on the use case as far as where it's being deployed and what level you need.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. And thank you to each of our startup presenters for the excellent introductions to your companies and pilots. I'd like to bring in Shanna Horowitz now, our VP of Products and Programs at Newlab, who is going to kick us off with a moderated discussion with our 4 presenters. So Shanna, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you to each of the startups. This is not the first time I've heard the presentation, but I pick up something new every time, and we're really, really delighted to be working with each of your companies for the rest of 2020 and hopefully beyond as you scale your efforts here in New York. I wanted to start the discussion by talking a little bit more about collaboration. So obviously, pretty fundamental as you've each experienced firsthand at this point to the way that Newlab runs programs is trying to foster new connections. So connecting each of you in with relevant experts, whether that's people focused on the circular economy, energy, climate change, certainly government agencies, and then groups that really represent the communities where your products are going to be deployed. So I would love to invite each of you to reflect on maybe one conversation or insight that you've gleaned so far from that type of engagement with these different experts and how that's impacting either directly in the near term, how you're thinking about your pilot, or even your product or your kind of go-to-market strategy more generally. So Danielle, maybe we can start with you. I know you talked about kind of a few different communities where you're going to be deploying, and I know there's been a lot of community-based conversations around that.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and there's lots of answers. So I'll stick with maybe two examples. One is that New York City is a huge place, and it's impossible for one person to know every neighborhood and all of the communities in it. And so one of the things that we really care about is, as Algramo, not just to market, but also really serving communities and providing the service that they really need. And so it's been amazing to work with the business improvement districts that Newlab has introduced us to then introduce us to the community level actors who are really essential for actually bringing this product to the ground and implementing it. And so that's been amazing. I think the other direction that's been super helpful is engaging with the city. I think there are lots of ways in which we as Algramo can work directly with the city through a number of different departments to create benefit on both sides. And so that's a longer term conversation, obviously a much more complex institution to be working with. We're excited to be those channels and working with the experts that Newlab has introduced us to help navigate exactly who in the city we should be speaking with and what types of programs are most appropriate to work on together.
Great, thanks Danielle. Doug, maybe I can invite you next into the conversation. I know I've been privy to some of the discussions with the Governor's Island group, and they obviously have an incredible amount of local knowledge about their mission and what they're trying to do for New Yorkers. How has that influenced your thinking?
You know, actually, I was surprised, you know, when we went into this, I was purely thinking water quality, data, waste removal, and really in that box. And just their discussions with them would really open up the opportunity as far as the impact from an educational perspective of why it's important we're doing this. How is technology changing the way we live? How do we have to be smarter? And really why we're doing it, right? And so that piece of it really made me think about maybe we need to do a better job of educating around those pieces and not just be so operationally focused.
Great. David, any insights? I know your team has worked a lot with our team at Newlab because you're actually, your first site for deployment is our building. And there's a lot of different zones of activity within our space. How has that influenced your thinking or represent something new for you guys?
Right. I'll say that New York City is, we're based out of Philly, so it's not too far away, but we're national. But New York City is a top priority market for us. Some of the unique things that are going on, one is they have relatively high utility rates in a very progressive municipal environment policies. They recently passed something called Local Law 97, and it's part of the city's Green New Deal, which impacts building owners as it creates carbon emission limits for most buildings over 25,000 square feet. So it's as we look at the other states, it's one of the more ambitious environmental regulations in the world. It impacts over 57,000 buildings across the city. And the goal is reducing building-based emissions by 40% by 2030. So, we believe there's a lot of opportunity for us to come in. And as Doug just said, I think the biggest part is just educating people about it. When we have conversations, it's either of disbelief that we're handling it because the company's just invested millions of dollars on HVAC and lighting, and they think that it has controls and somehow it takes care of plug load, but it doesn't. And then the other people are just astonished there's just not a solution out there beforehand. So I think with the penalties, which can be very sizable if you don't meet these limits, that will be starting in a couple of years, we're able to get some real conversations going, especially with the larger property owners who are strategizing on this and looking for new solutions. So plug load management is becoming a new channel as people look to, especially for efficient buildings that are LEED certified. This is the kind of the last slice that they can go after. So,
for sure. Savita, how about you and your team? How are you guys getting insight as you plan your pilot from some of these different conversations?
Well, we've always, just as part of the way we operate, engaged in a lot of collaboration across different sectors when we come into a community. But I have to say it's been incredibly impressive to actually engage directly with the city. And the way in which there's just kind of, the climate action and the Green New Deal is really a cross-cutting effort across agencies. And so what the pilot will really help us do is to develop the template for, as we scale mapping across the city, how to really best serve all of those different agencies. It's everything from housing to transportation to city planning, and the sustainability teams, but just really, really broad and cross-cutting. And the other element that's been really impressive to see is that environmental justice is also a cross-cutting theme, and that there's interagency working groups that are actually sort of working on this comprehensively across the board. And so that's just really exciting, and we're excited to team up with the city across all of those different efforts.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's like each of your products and services hits on a couple of different civic-based challenges, and so having kind of access to those different entities who are each thinking about those things in the course of their daily operations, and then more long-term for policy change or policy implementation, it's nice to be able to have kind of those nuanced conversations with the different stakeholders. Yeah. I want to close us out by asking each of you to kind of reflect on what success looks like for these pilots specifically. Of course, you're each going to be deploying your product in a new environment. You've got new users. Each of you kind of touched in some capacity on the kind of impact that your product has in general. But let's fast forward to the end of 2020. The pilots have happened. Certain conversations have unfolded. How will we know we've been successful? What in your kind of wildest dreams does success look like for the deployment as part of this program? I'm going to start with David. Why don't you reflect a little bit with us?
Sure. We've got some very discrete and tangible impacts. One is obviously directly impacting the utility bill. If you can reduce energy via plug load management, and we hope to see it continue to grow. We're currently somewhere between 10 to 50% of total building reduction. So that is very direct. Doesn't take much energy to create rules to turn things off when they shouldn't be on. So that's very direct. And then peak shaving also helps. That's one. And then other things that people don't realize, like on average, we find that spaces typically have somewhere between 3 to 5% of either redundant or underutilized equipment that they could get out of, not having to support, not have to maintenance, and be able to discard it properly environmentally. We have seen more and more folks going from underutilized workstations as people are getting more and more remote, especially after COVID, and taking a new approach to space management, and where we can help understand the real, not just tracking occupancy traffic, which is what traffic counter sensors do, but actually see what the actual usage is. We just saw one building that on a couple of floors that over 100 people, there were, let me see if I get the stat say it correctly, 20% of the workstations on 2 of the floors were utilized less than 10%. So that should be an indicator, actual data to the business, the organization. Do they want to go to a floating desk situation? Do they want, it may not be direct cost, but it's culturally, it's changing and dynamically how they're doing. So they don't have to spend more money on expansion and be able to live. So there's those kind of examples that are very concrete. Some of them are very direct, some of them are indirect, where we can just serve up data, and it's up to the organization to decide whether they want to make a change or not.
Thank you. Savita, you've hinted a little bit that this pilot is hopefully the first step towards citywide deployment, but tell us a little bit more about how you're thinking about success.
Yeah, so for us, success is one, really demonstrating the value of the data and identifying, new insights that maybe had never really been made visible before. So demonstrating the power of the platform to do that in Brooklyn, and frankly, directly engaging the public and the local community in that conversation and having them be a part of that process. And that in doing that, we're actually identifying new opportunities for emissions reductions that also protect public health. And so, if we can deliver that, that I think is success, and it sets us up for the expansion that we're planning in 2021 across the city, to take lessons learned from that, to really drive emissions reductions across multiple industries across the city in 2021 and beyond.
Great. Doug, what about for you?
Well, first and foremost, really to support Governor's Island in achieving their mission and being a substantial impact towards their mission, and as it relates to sustainability and everything that they're about there. Now, looking forward, we really want to look at other use cases that have been part of a lot of great conversations we had with the various departments, whether it's the Superfund cleanup sites that are about to get on array in New York City, whether it's working with various departments that capture different pieces of data that we may use or may be interested in using our data, of how do we make it more valuable, how do we communicate, how do we automate that process. So I think really, again, supporting Governor's Island, but then to look at how do we expand this in a meaningful way as well.
Great. Danielle, any last words?
Yeah, I think for us, it's pretty simple. We want to see people using our machines in the field, and also hopefully seeing some reuse rates that exceed or at least match what we're seeing in Chile. So at the minimum, we're looking for about a 40% reuse rate. And the high end, I mean, there's nothing really in the market today that really exceeds that. So if we get 70-80% of people reusing their packaging and using the Algramo system, that's a huge success for us, and definitely an indicator that we want to scale and keep moving forward.
Great. Thank you, guys. Kate, I'll pass it back to you for the last word, and thanks again to everyone for joining us this afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're really excited to be able to introduce our 2020 cohort to the public. And please follow along through our Newlab website. We'll be having additional touch points throughout the year and sharing updates on how these pilots progress. So we hope you follow along with us. And thank you again, everyone, for your time.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.